Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Music Ranking Podcast and YouTube show that we like to call Music Meltdown. This episode, we're going to be tackling a little bit of an interesting group for the show. The 1975 modern pop rock band with their first record coming out in 2013. They have a couple of notable EPs before then, but for the most part, they got their majority start in 2013. Started getting some notoriety off a lot of those tracks, and then they just kept pumping them out and gotten bigger and bigger till 2020 because people didn't like that record. But they got a new one out a couple of weeks ago. I figured this would be a good time because I know my friend of the show, Zach, absolutely adores this group. Maybe to a problematic sense, but it is what it is. Yeah, I was pretty familiar with all of these going into it. I knew the first four. I'd heard them all at least like 2-3 times. I didn't know the new one. I actually purposefully waited to listen for the show. I have officially heard it for about 2 hours, so that's pretty cool. With that being said, I think I may have alluded to how much you know this group, but how about you give your bases?
Yeah, sure. I'm even though I love this group, I just adore this group, and they're just one of my favorite current day groups. I didn't know them until Brief Inquiry came out. That's kind of where I jumped on board. Actually, I did watch some of their live stuff, I think, before that album came out, and that's kind of where I first got interested. Some of the festivals have like the webcasts and stuff, and I checked them out, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. They're kind of 80s, but they kind of have that like look of like 2000s rock bands, but the sound is very different. I just thought it was a really cool combination. And then when Brief Inquiry came out, I saw it was getting great reviews compared to the first two, which were getting more modest reviews. And I was like, okay, I should definitely check this out now. And so that's kind of where I jumped on board. And then, of course, I learned all the old stuff. And then since then, both Notes and Being Funny were, night of release, anticipated listens, do it twice in the night kind of thing. So that's the kind of fan I am. I've seen them once already. I'm going to see them again in a few weeks. And yeah, you're not going to hear too many negative things from me. Just going to try to defend this group, somewhat controversial group, as much as I can. So
Yeah, this is the love story of the century here, Zach and Maddie Healy. But anyways, I figure I'll just
as
kick
a
this off.
musician.
As a musician, sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick this off. I don't know where this record's going to place for you, but I think that this is fairly controversial within the 1975 fandom. So I'm actually talking about the debut first. I think this is an interesting start for the group, and it really shows just how kind of weird they are. They're very much modern pop rock in many sense, but they incorporate a ton of 80s elements and sort of the weirder 80s pop stuff, like a Peter Gabriel, maybe even like an Oingo Boingo, new wave sort of thing. But they have such great pop writing and such great hook craft that it's able to hook you and just able to pull you in right away. This record and all of these records, Matty Healy is just incredible. He's one of the best modern frontmen in general, in my opinion. His personality and just how strong of an accent he has just brings everything together in such a unique way that very few other bands are able to do. I guess like Arctic Monkeys with Alex Turner, but I don't like Alex Turner as much. I guess that's sort of the closest point of comparison that I have. And there's plenty of great songs on the debut. The City's amazing. Sex as well, even though the EP version probably better. Chocolate's amazing. Settle Down, Robbers, and She Lay Out. Notably, though, for here and on a couple of later records, there are some pretty pointless interludes. They tend to bloat their records, even the best of them, notably on the 2021. And I don't have an issue with it inherently, but most of their records could definitely do with a trimming to like 35, 40 minutes, and then this band would be, I would like them as much as I presume you do. There was one song on here, I believe Money, which I really don't care for. It's probably my least favorite song in the catalog. It's really obnoxious. Generally speaking, there's a ton of great highs, a really interesting debut, and showcases a lot of what the 1975 would go on to perfect on their next record, and some hints about what they would do after that. I still have this at 3.5 stars. Not a bad record in sight for this group.
Nice. Yeah, that's first of all, I do have that one later on. But I also anticipated that of all the albums, this is probably the one we'd disagree about the most. But still, that's a pretty good review from you. Pretty good start.
for sure.
So I'm pretty happy.
Yep.
So my number 5 is going to be the new one, Being Funny in a Foreign Language. And I still really like it. Um, I have this at 4 stars at the moment, although I'm slightly considering raising it to 4.5. So it's tough because I definitely listen to it a lot more and like it a lot more than my other like 4-star albums. But I'm trying to like think like what will I think of this album in like 5-10 years or something like that. That's kind of where I'm throwing that out of. So anyway, this is their shortest album. It's produced by Jack Antonoff, who has produced a lot of other artists. He goes by Bleachers, and he was also in the band Fun, so that's kind of his own stuff. And then he has produced Taylor Swift, Lana Del Rey, Lorde, so a lot of the big names right now. However, I do think his production approach is a little different than some of the like mega producers like Max Martin and that. I think he works on a more close level with the artist and really gets to know them and tries to be like a full collaborator almost. So I like that about him. I don't love everything he's done. I think he has a certain kind of sound, but here, I think Matty Healy is a strong enough, creative person that he's not really just Jack Antonoff's presence isn't really disrupting what's going on too much. In fact, if anything, he's just making it sound like even better almost. Just a really, really great sound to this album. My kind of first impressions of this album when I kind of heard some of the singles like Happiness and I'm in Love with You is that it's the same 1975 sound that I really like, but just the lyrical complexity is a little less. It's just very clean sounding, and I was a really big fan of the experimentation that they were doing on Brief Inquiry and Notes, and so with this new album, there's just a little bit less of that overall. That said, there are some really good tracks on this album. I think my favorite one is the third track, Looking for Somebody to Love. I just think that is just that's exactly what I want my 1975 to be. Just the music is just upbeat and peppy and so fun. And the lyrics are about like a mass shooter and it works. It's just so weird, but it just takes a completely different perspective on a really, really, terrible thing. And I just think it creates a really interesting artistic statement as a result. So I just love that song. Really, the whole beginning of this album is really good. Happiness has really risen for me. It's just a great beat. Just the sound of it is so good. And then Oh Caroline, also a really, really nice song. Part of the Band is one of the more creative songs. It kind of like I think it sounds a little bit like a Bon Iver song or something like that. I think you disagree with that, but my favorite part are just some of the lyrics of this song. For each of these albums, I put down a few. I just feel like I have to say, I know some vaccinista tote bag cheek baristas sitting east on their communista keisters, writing about their ejaculations. I like my men like I like my coffee, full of soy milk and so sweet it won't offend anybody, while staining the pages of the nation. I just so fun, so creative. Like, I don't know. I feel like this should be taught in English classes almost. Just really, really at that level. There's definitely some more awkward lyrics on this album too. But I don't know. If you like Matty Healy's personality, you're gonna like that as well. I do think it's a little front loaded towards the end. You get tracks like Wintering and When We Are Together that are just like sweet, but I don't know. It just kind of fizzles out into a little bit of that like sweet, happy, but not too like cutting edge kind of sound. And then Human 2 is just like a little too like apologetic. I don't know, or just kind of like begging for sympathy kind of thing. It's fine. It's still a really nice song. Pretty much all of their songs I like. The last thing I wanted to say about this one is that a lot of them are kind of like love songs, and it's almost like a love album in a way. He was dating FKA Twigs, who's another great artist, and I think they broke up, which is kind of an interesting thing to look back on how these are songs written when he was in this relationship and was really loving it, and now it's past. It's kind of an interesting perspective to bring to it. So yeah, I like it a lot. Just it doesn't have quite as many high highs as the other albums, so that's why it's at the bottom. But I still really like it.
Yeah, maybe a bit of recency bias, but I'm not talking about that one for a little bit. And yeah, I don't really hear the Bon Iver thing. I think it's very comparable to a track like Nana or something like that, where it's just sort of softer, more laid back
Part
approach
of
for
the
the group.
band.
Yeah, like
Interesting. Okay.
not one to one, but I just don't necessarily see Bon Iver. But then again, I love Bon Iver a lot, so I've heard those records a
It's all
good
that
bit of
matters.
time for sure. Well, anyways, I'm very happy neither of us have this at the bottom because I have a story with Notes on a Conditional form. When I first heard this record, I really hated it. I did not like it at all. I think I gave it a 3 out of 10 because I was just like really annoyed because it was so long, it was so droning, it was so boring to me. Absolutely dead wrong on pretty much all of those things. I'm up to 4 stars. It's a low 4 stars, but still 4 stars. I think it's a really good record. Um, yeah, it's considerably longer than Inquiry, and it's generally speaking going in a similar direction that Inquiry was, but it's longer, so I like it less. It's a really interesting record with a little bit less. I don't know. I feel like the best way to describe this is it's a little more aimless, has less like defined song structures. This is their biggest hindrance in terms of having a ton of instrumentals and borderline like ambient pieces at points. A large there's a large emphasis on electronics, I feel, and I really like a lot of that stuff. But at times I do drag on a bit, notably like the first couple of tracks after People, I think kind of bleed into each other, and I don't necessarily tell them apart as well. It opens off brilliantly though with People, their most rocking, their most punky number. It's really fucking weird for this group to have a song like that, but really good. I like it a lot. From there, there's also some amazing pop songs. I think there's something you should know. If you're too shy, let me know. And tonight, I wish your boy are all great pop songs. I loved Roadkill and You and Me Together song. My main issue with this one is pretty similar to the debut. It can be rather scatterbrained, and it lacks sort of a clear focus and idea as to what they were doing. But besides that, I do think most of the songs are very good. I think that it's really interesting while it's on. And if this had been like 60 minutes instead of 80, I could definitely have forgiven the more ambient droning pieces. So I feel like that could have played into a certain section on the record. As for now, though, like I said, I have it at 4 stars. I think it's really good, just with some noticeable flaws to keep it below some of the other records.
Nice. Yeah, I figured that album is, on the one hand, it's probably got a lot of stuff you like. On the other hand, it's too long
Yeah,
for you. So
it's definitely a grower. It takes a lot of listens, but I understood that some people just didn't give it that point of
yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't give it that way. It got, from what I understand, it got pretty critically panned, and it really is a shame.
Yeah, I think this is a weird group because I do think the critical side, at least like Pitchfork, is a little different than the fan base opinion. Definitely on the fan base side, I think Notes is probably their least popular album. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw a bunch of distaste going towards notes from other reviewers that I would watch that really liked them
I
beforehand.
see. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely like the people on YouTube and stuff will
no,
definitely.
notably like an ARTV really hated it for some reason,
I see.
but ARTV likes taste a lot of the time, so it's understandable. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but there were a few good reviews of it, but just more from more fancy music press or whatever,
for sure.
less from the fans, so to speak. Anyway, I'm not talking about that album quite yet. My number four is a little controversial, I guess. Although again, I love this album, so please, please give me some slack. But it's I like it when you sleep, for you are so beautiful yet so unaware of it. Number four, and to be clear, I love this album. I really love it. I have my main issue with it is only just the way it flows and the order of the tracks and stuff like that. It has some of their best tracks for sure. This is probably the fan base's favorite album, I would say. Probably the one with the most number of tracks that kind of have stuck in the concert. Definitely, and I love all those songs. So just to kind of go through it a little bit. First 6 tracks on this album, just love it. I probably the best beginning of any 1975 album, quite possibly, other than my number one, maybe. Um, But it starts off with after their title track, it starts off with "Love Me," and that song is just such a jolt of energy. And he's so good at being the front person and just being kind of ironic about it. Um, yeah, just so cool. That goes right into "Ugh," and that's a really fun, funky one. It has like a little bit of like a Michael Jackson feel. Like I feel like some of this album in general kind of takes from "Bad" or something like that, and gets that similar kind of energy. Um, you think Peter Gabriel? Yeah, for sure. I would say the whole catalog feels a little bit like '80s Peter Gabriel. But that goes into "A Change of Heart." Really amazing song with some great lyrics. Just the best part of that is you said I'm full of diseases, your eyes were full of regret, and then you took a picture of your salad and put it on the internet. It's so reflective of our current times, and just the fact that we try to have these like serious conversations, and we're still kind of like slaves to our social media or whatever. So really enjoy that song. Moves into "She's American," and just these first two albums are both produced by the same person, this guy Mike Crosby, and he also produced Laney, who's a kind of a band with a similar sound to the 1975, not quite as good. But I really like his sound because it has a little bit of like electronic elements, or just it feels very much like it would fit okay in the EDM world almost, and he's bringing that to this more like pop context. So you hear that in a song like "She's American" with the interlude, that you really feel like you're like by the beach and just spacing out. And I really like that vibe that the 1975 is able to get to, while still making very creative songs, including this song, which I think is just very catchy. Moving into "If I Believe You," which is their first like gospel-y song, which they do a couple more times, and really like that one, which is kind of about questioning, what religion's all about. He's known to be kind of an atheist, and I think he takes an interesting perspective that's still not, dismissive of religion, but critically thinks about it. Then we get into kind of a stretch of songs, which are all kind of this like post-rock sound. "Please Be Naked," "Lost My Head," and "The Ballad of Me and My Brain." And it just loses me a little bit, because even though they're nice, I'm not saying they're bad. Like they're really, I would like them in like a different album or like their own EP or something like that. But they just kind of, they're all pretty long, and it just, as a album listening experience, it breaks it up for me. And then it goes right into "Somebody Else," which is one of the most famous songs. Very 10cc inspired there, but still a great track. Love hearing it. It comes up every now and then when I'm in a bar, and it's just, everybody likes to sing along and stuff. Just really a great track for that. So there's that one track, and then you get "Loving Someone," which is one of my lesser favorite of their songs. I like what it's about. And I like that part of it. But it just, the chorus, "You should be loving someone," it just, I don't know if it does it for me. And then another post-rock song, probably the best one, which is the title track, really pretty, but of the post-rock tracks. And then you move into the sound. And I love the sound. It's like a very pop song, just like a lot of other pop songs, but it's like more than that. It's more beautiful. It's more about like the spirit of it all. And really, really great song. Ends a lot of their concerts, and very deservedly. And that moves right into "This Must Be My Dream," and that's another beautiful one. Then the fan favorite "Paris," which I do like it, but more for the lyrics. I think it's musically is very similar to "Every Breath You Take" by The Police. And then it kind of ends with these like quieter tracks, "Nana" and "She Lays Down," which are sweet, but just the whole experience of it, I kind of like the songs, and I rarely want to actually listen to this whole album. I just feel like the songs are sometimes awkwardly placed. Again, the first string of tracks are great, but then after that, it just seems like somebody else pops out of nowhere. And then the last tracks, by then you're kind of tired. So that's the only reason I have it at number 4. But other than that, because there's so many great songs, for me, it's 4.5 stars.
Yeah, it's fucking absurd to me. But even still, it's my number 3. But let's get one thing out of the way real quick. The only song I don't like on this record is the title track. I
Oh,
don't like that
interesting.
one. I think that one is the one that sort of really drags on and feels incredibly out of place because that one directly follows "Loving Someone," right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I love "Loving Someone." That one took me a couple of listens to get into, especially in the chorus. Like after he goes like "Loving Someone," and there's like this really cool synth part right after there. I really love that. For me, though, this is much notably a step forward from the debut, leaning a lot more into the 80s pop revival that was going on around the time and what they were kind of helping to create. For the most part, works out really well. The synth work on this record, probably their best, just really incredible. I especially love every point in which they use the sax. It's kind of understated in their music, and it's not used that much. Pretty much any time that it's shown, they basically have done it the best since the 80s for any group, I would say, because it's just great. There's just so many amazing songs to this record. Love Me, Ugh, A Change of Heart, If I Believe You, The Ballad of Me and My Brain, Somebody Else, The Sound, Paris, She Lays Down, and This Must Be My Dream. That's 10 songs, and I think they're 10 great songs. The Issue, there's 7 other songs. The last 2 songs, I kind of agree. I don't think that those ones are very good. I don't think that they really fit on the record, and I would have just preferred they be cut because there goes an easy like 6, 7 minutes. And I already said that I didn't like the title track, so there goes another 6.5 minutes there. That's 12 minutes you could cut right there. I think it's a much tighter, a much more cohesive unit. While you still have that sort of vaguely post rock section that you're saying, I really like that. I think that's a super interesting moment to add into it. And I think it really helps us separate because as we were talking about the start, very just like direct, very pop forward, the stuff like She's American and Love Me. I kind of like having that in there as a way to break it up, especially before you said that comes before Somebody Else, which is still more of a less tempo, like a lower tempo, more just melodically driven track. And I love the instrumental to that one, especially one of their best.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, uh, this is kind of a sloppy review here. There's a ton of really great songs across here, but it's just way too long, in my opinion. Another one that's reaching 80 minutes, that would just be better if it was 60. Like, arguably, if you cut those songs that I said that I wasn't as into, I could definitely see 4.5, maybe even 5, because these songs that are great on this record are just like some of the best of the entire decade. And I'm a massive 2010s defender, but I don't know. I just see so much potential in this record. And I used to have it at a 9 out of 10. I used to really love it, but it's just like the length is too big of an issue to overlook anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're more similar than you seem to lay it out to be. Even the title track, like I probably cut it, honestly. I like it again, but it just feels out of place. I would agree. Okay, so what am I on to next? My number 3 is going to be Notes on a Conditional Form. And this one is very long and very diverse. It was preceded by a lot of singles. I kind of remember each one coming out and feeling like it was a completely different album. The first single they put out was People, which is just a completely different thing for them. This huge punky rock track that's kind of against climate change, but then also, has some other components, just about general feeling like you're too lazy and wanting to actually do stuff. And yeah, that's a great track. I think the fan base did not like it because it's just not what you want from a band that makes nice 80s, pop tunes. But I still think it's really well done for a punkier track, and they just never did it again, at least so far. And I'd be curious to hear them do some heavier tracks like this. Then the second single was Frail State of Mind, and that kind of was a little bit more indicative of what this album would be because it has a little bit of that like UK garage influence, a lot of the 90s electronic sounds kind of coming through, being used here. And I don't know a whole lot about that scene, but just based on how much I like this album, it's probably something I want to explore more because like the backing track of something like Frail State of Mind, as well as tracks like I Think There's Something You Should Know, or even Having No Head. Just love those beats, and it brings me into my like happy place with my headphones and stuff like that. Just um, really really great sound. I think the George Daniel, who's the drummer, is actually responsible for a lot of the programming and stuff. So you kind of hear his influence on this album maybe the most of all the albums. Me and You Together song was another single that has more of like it almost feels like a 90s sitcom or something like that theme song, but again, done in a really fun way. The Birthday Party being more of a lyrical track. It took me a while. I think when I first listened to it, I did not like it at all. With a few re-listens, I realized it's a really great song about, Maddie was addicted to heroin for many years and went to rehab during the creation of the third album, Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. This song, The Birthday Party, is kind of reflecting on that experience. And I love the lines at the end where he's like, I depend on my friends to stay clean, as sad as it seems. It really is, it gives it a very realistic touch. And it's also the fact that the rest of the song is just about this walking around this birthday party or whatever makes it very, touching, just to hear how this experience impacts his daily life. Then you've got something like Jesus Christ 2005, God Bless America, which is completely folky, also something they never did, or I haven't heard since then. Duet with Phoebe Bridgers, who remains a good friend of the band. She appeared in the music video for I'm in Love with You. But yeah, I like that song. I think it's, an interesting song, good message. And yeah, then the album came out, and there's just a lot more songs even from what I've already discussed, and even more stylistic variation thrown in there. And by the end of it, you're getting an album that starts with like people, and then there's like an interlude, because how else are you going to transition from that track? But then the interlude itself, like, it's not the most interesting. So it just ends up, because there's just so many different styles, the running length really balloons on this thing. You got something like Then Because She Goes, which is like 2 minutes of shoegaze, and that has nothing to do with anything else. Roadkill is like a funny song. Shiny Collarbone is like this like dance song. That one I think is just like, why did they even put this on here?
Yeah. Gonna interject here. I don't typically do this anymore, but yeah, Shiny Collarbone. I stand corrected. That's their worst song. That's terrible. I hate it.
Yeah, a very bizarre choice. They basically just found a song they liked and re-recorded it. It sounds like almost. I don't know why they needed to do that. You got Nothing Revealed, Everything Denied, which is like a gospel song. So I like all these songs. I think they're really good. I love that they're experimenting. I love that there's different styles, and I like all the things they're commenting on. By the end, you've got songs like Playing on My Mind and What Should I Say that I'm just not quite as big on. And just by this point, you've moved through so much stuff that it kind of gets bloated. So that's why I have this one at 4.5, but I just love so many of these songs. I haven't even talked about If You're Too Shy, Let Me Know, which is one of their best tracks. Love the intro with FKA Twigs singing over it. And then the kind of 80s in excess guitar that really a lot of this album is kind of lacking, emerging from that. And they just, for an album that they're experimenting on, they just deliver with one really, really solid 1975 track about a really interesting subject, which is, online relationships and how that kind of experience feels. So really, really creative song. Another one I'm talking a lot here, but just at the very end, guys, it's just a little cutesy, but I really love Don't Worry. It's a song written by Tim Healy, his dad, that he decided to re-record, and really, really beautiful song. This album came out, all the singles were released before the COVID-19 lockdowns, but the album actually came out during then. Obviously, they couldn't have known about stuff like that, but I think hearing lyrics like, when you wake up and don't know what day it is, don't worry, baby, I'm here with you. I think it really brought a lot of comfort. This was an album that I turned to a lot, so really love it. Just a little crazy and all over the place, but fan base, you need to get your act together and re-listen to some of this stuff because it's really good.
Yeah, I gotta agree there. That one took me a good while to get into. That's probably the record of theirs I've actually had the most listens into. If I had to guess because I heard it when it first came out. I probably listened to it like 6 times, and it's taken me a while just to get into it. And I'm to the point in which I'm really, really liking it a lot. Nothing Revealed Everything Tonight. I can't believe I forgot to talk about that song, but that one's just amazing. Especially the Nothing Revealed half of it. That's like up there for my favorite 1975 song. Just that
Yeah, yeah.
half. I think it's brilliant. But anyways, will the new one be my number one? No, I'm not stupid. It's the number two. I didn't even realize Jack Antonoff because he typically sucks, and this record's cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, uh, just to put a jab out here, I tried to listen to the new Taylor Swift record. I quite literally fell asleep,
Yeah.
so that was fun.
Deserved.
Um, but yeah, I've seen generally mixed to mostly negative reviews about this one, and maybe that's just me, but I don't really see that at all. I think it's a really strong pop record. They're fully embracing 80s again on this after taking their divergence into that sort of EDM realm or whatever you want to try and call notes, because that the hodgepodge, I suppose. So many amazing songs here. Happiness is really great. Looking for Someone to Love, I'm in Love with You, and Oh Caroline might be my favorite here. It's really exceptional song there. Thought for a little bit less, for a softer, less poppy number, I thought Part of the Band was really good. Not necessarily Bon Iver, but still very good. Um, and I love the ending song, When We Are Together. Features a small dose of string, which they hadn't really used all that much from what I remember. And I just think that it's really great here. And overall, this might be my favorite vocal record of Healy. I think that he's just sounding great across all of these songs. He's maturing a little bit in his delivery. He's not as frantic or as sort of wacky as he could get on the earlier ones. And I think that really works. I think that his voice, while I do like when he's being all sort of goofy, all eccentric, and just sort of wild, I think on here he sounds a little bit more reined back, a little bit more mature, and I think that it lends itself better as he's able to be more of just that strong, confident frontman than what he was before. He seems like he knows everything and is like just sitting there being the intellectual, like their idol Peter Gabriel was in the 80s on something like so. For me, this is a high 4-star record. I think that's really good and probably somewhere in my top 10 of the year. Really don't get the distaste for this one.
Well, I would agree with that. I think on the channel where we met, people are saying like, oh, well, Zach has it at 4 stars and he loves the 1975, so it must not be a very good album. And I'm trying to say like, no, I'm really trying to be objective here. Like, I think this is a very good album. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, no, there's other people that you wouldn't think would like that record on the server that like it. Eric has it at four
like Eric,
stars.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there you go. So moving on, my number 2 is going to be the debut. And so I like it more than you do. I actually have recently raised this to 5 stars because I just adore it. This is just the sound of a band that knows exactly the kind of thing they want to do, and they just succeed wildly. Like, that's what I hear to this. So the historical reasoning I have for that is, the band was originally started and they were called Drive Like I Do. They were inspired by groups like Coheed and Cambria that kind of had like a proggy sound, but also like an emo-y sound almost. There are some tracks from that era that you can find online that I highly recommend because they are really awesome. Songs like The Go and especially Ghosts is an amazing song. I really wish they brought that one back and played it live because it is so catchy. But they kind of realized that as good as some of the stuff they were doing was, they didn't really have, it just felt all over the place, and they wanted more of a defined like image and almost brand. And that's kind of where they got the 1975 idea from. And they also started, since that era, incorporating more sounds from post-rock, from bands, especially M83, I think was a big influence. And so on the EPs that preceded the album, you can really hear a lot of that influence. And I think the pop songs that ultimately the 1975 doesn't really have, other than a couple short interludes, there aren't too many instrumental or post-rock songs on there, but the pop songs are so good because they're coming from this more, dense musical background, and they're really careful about making sure all the sounds are just like perfect. And but they condense them into songs that are short and catchy, and just it feels like Boehner after Boehner. And there's also the kind of the theme of the album, which is that it has a more cinematic kind of sheen to it, and also definitely has that like John Hughes, like looking back on that kind of feel to a lot of the songs. And so it, I like that with bands like M83, Hurry Up We're Dreaming as well. But like that album is just a little too long and a little too messy, whereas the 1975 is just like perfectly condensed and just flows. So starts off with The City, which, I don't know if they've really kind of gotten rid of that song from their set list, and people don't really talk about it, but I love the song. I think it's a really great song. Money, I love that song. I don't know what you're talking about. Just I love the beats, like the electronic elements on it. It just makes me feel like I'm like lost in the middle of Coachella or something like that. It has that just like, yeah, just kind of teenage wanderlust to it. So I think that one flows really well for me. And then going right into Chocolate, which was a Hughes song, and just so catchy. The chorus is just amazing. A little bit almost of like a Arctic Monkeys kind of feel of that song, but like poppier. Then that moves into Sex, which is one of the two songs that they kind of rescued from their Drive Like I Do era, and they re-recorded them, and they sound even better re-recorded to the mostly. And like how these tracks have a little bit more of that rock edge, and they kind of help to liven up the album. That moves into Talk, which I used to not be crazy about, but I think it's great. It's like a new wave slice of fun. And then the short in Encounter, I mean, it's so short, and I think it's just a nice like breath of air, honestly. Moves into Hard Out. That one really feels like an 80s movie, but just so beautiful, like such a beautiful song. And just, yeah, like earworm. I could listen to it all day. Settle Down, kind of a similar vein. Really like the video for that one, actually. But then Robbers, one of their signature songs, just really, really powerful. And love at the end, where he's kind of like, you look so, and you don't know if he's saying cool or cold because she's dead, but it's also kind of like this melodramatic experience that they had together. And it was very powerful. They did not play that one last time live, so I'm really hoping to hear it this time. Girls, really creative song, just very pop, and just really delivers on what you would expect a track called Girls to be about. At the same time, it includes really creative lyrics like, I said, yo, I think you better go. I can't take you. You just sit and get stoned with 30-year-olds and you think you've made it. Well, shouldn't you be fucking with somebody your age instead of making changes? Wrestle to the ground. God help me now. Just he inserts like really intelligent lyrical snippets into these like very poppy sounding songs that you wouldn't really notice unless you pay attention. But that just makes it so much more of an enjoyable experience for me. I will admit that, a couple songs at the end, they just sound a little similar to the stuff before. So I get that I think that's, for a while I had it at 4.5 because it's, it's a little samey, and even though I like Pressure and She Way Out, it's just kind of the same sound. But I just, I think that this album has such a, great cohesive feel to it, and I just am really never bored at a single moment, and I think it's just a great expression of who they are. So 5 stars, the debut.
Well, that's some goofiness, but I'm glad that you love it. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we agree that A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships is the best record, and yeah, you can't disagree with what's correct. Unlike some of their other records, this one, it's only like 53, 56 minutes. It lacks a lot of the fluff that bogs down the previous record, and it isn't as pop driven as I feel that record was. I feel like this is when they really, really start to showcase their worship of Peter Gabriel.
Yes.
And that's not a bad thing. Peter Gabriel is he's pretty cool, I guess. I'm not the biggest Peter Gabriel fan, but I'm a big Matty Healy fan, so I'll appreciate him doing what Peter Gabriel did for the modern day. And even though you could say that I've heard the case that maybe they're a little bit derivative of some of 80s pop and whatnot, I feel like, well, for one thing, their records sound great. The 80s kind of notorious for being pretty dated at a lot of circumstances. And I think that their material just sounds really great. It's always up to par. And I really like that modern production style of it's taking things that made the 80s so unique, but it's sort of with the more modern technology and the more modern um, recording techniques, it's able to make it sound even better, even smoother, and just sort of get rid of any of those sort of cheesiness that could be found in some of those other ones. Um, this is my favorite version of their title track, which we've mentioned in passing, but on all the records, they have a song that's generally based around a similar, or was generally based around a similar sort of melody and passage. The new one's pretty different, though. On this one, he uses a really interesting vocoder effect that I think is a really unique style and a really unique take on it. Songs like Love It If We Made It, Two Time, Two Time, Two Time, Give Yourself a Try are some of the greatest pop songs that the band ever made. There are some amazing slower acoustic numbers, stuff like Be My Mistake, Sincerity is Scary, They Always Want to Die Sometimes are the highlights in that regard. My favorite song here is actually How to Draw, which had a version on the CD version that I like when you sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There was a demo version on some of them. And I think that this is just the perfected version of the song, just really gorgeous,
Yeah.
really beautiful. It's really interesting and incredibly well constructed as well. For me, just on a track by track basis, I think that it's their most consistent, it's their most varied, and their most captivating full record. And I wish I could give this 4.5, but I have it at a really high four. It's like an eight. It's like an 8 out of 10. It's really strong, really good, but I I still think that it's maybe slightly too long. I could see cutting a track or two and it just breezing on by. Something like, even though I like it, the man is computer, whatever that one's called, it's a little unnecessary, even though it's sort of tongue in cheek. But yeah, past that, really strong record. Could not blame you for giving this anything higher, and I can't deny you giving it a 5.
Yes. So, um, yes, I'm glad you had that one at the top. And you know, I sort of expect again, like you're very picky about some of these interludes and stuff. But I'm happy that you at least accept one of my two 5-star albums here. Okay, number one, Brief Inquiry. So this is one of my favorite albums of the decade. It may be my favorite album of the decade. Goes back and forth between 3 or so, but man, do I love this album. It's just like a perfect slice of everything that they do. It's creative and has a lot of more creative songs and some genre variants, but it's not too all over the place like Notes. It does have some post-rocky songs, but like How to Draw, but they're perfectly placed to not interrupt the track flow and keep it perfectly consistent. Yeah, the fan base was not quite as high in this one. This is, definitely they like the first two the best, and maybe even the recent one. And especially a song like Two Time just did not go over well. I love that song. I love how it kind of comes right out of Give Yourself a Try, and it's just like future pop. That's what it sounds like to me. The auto tune is intense, but I just think it's so catchy. And I love how it contrasts with the really, really pretty like keys or whatever in the background. Just so cool. Give Yourself a Try itself. Just like the album opens with this, I think people say it's Joy Division inspired, but the lyrics are so, and the vocals are so different to me. It makes it much more of a fulfilling experience to my ears. Beginning the album with, you learn a couple things when you get to my age, like friends don't lie and it all tastes the same in the dark. When your vinyl and your coffee collection is a sign of the times, you're getting spiritually enlightened at 29. Just like, what a way to open. Just, I don't know, just so reflective of an age in a way that I think a lot of bands just don't quite get to. Then, How to Draw, I agree. I love that song. It's my favorite of their, even though it's not completely instrumental or anything like that. It just of their more post-rocky material. I think it's a perfect segue into Love It If We Made It, which is one of their most critically praised songs. I love it too. I love again how it kind of like lists all these different things happening in the world and kind of combines that into one song that kind of is like almost like a protest song at the same time as more of a just personal song. I love the way that it mixes those things up. It's actually not my favorite on the album though. I just prefer a couple others musically better, but do love it a lot. Be My Mistake is a perfect like little slowdown. I think some people find that song to be just kind of saccharine, but it's definitely, at least in the fan base, it's risen a lot since it was first released. Really pretty and sad song in a way. It kind of reflects somebody who's kind of like maybe asking for it, but doesn't really want. I don't know. It has that little bit of that perspective to it that I think is really interesting. A little bit reflective of like hookup culture or something like that, maybe. Sincerity is Scary, another really interesting one. Like this whole album comments so well on the time that it was released and the different kind of things that underscore it. I think he does a great job of that, which is why I think it's such a emblematic album for the 2010s. But I love that one kind of incorporates horns and almost has this 30s movie like that the music video has that feel to it, and I think the song does as well. And then I like America and America Likes Me, another one. I don't know if it's gone over super well in the fan base, but I love it. It's like a mix of like there's like trap elements to it almost, but also post-rock. Like the beginning reminds me a lot of Sigur Rós, but and then the vocals are almost more like Kanye-esque, but just the whole thing kind of combines being about again the times and gun violence and stuff like that. Just really crazy different track. Just something. It just sounds like something. There are very few things I've heard like it, and I just think it feels so ahead of the times. The Man Who Married a Robot is definitely goofy, but it does break up the record for me. I think if you have to put this on the album, I like it being right in the middle to kind of be as like a breather. Inside My Mind is kind of an interesting one, sort of continuing from the themes of The Man Who Married a Robot, being a little bit about like a stalker almost. And I think it's interesting because it's a pretty track, but then the lyrics are a little dark. And then that moves into It's Not Living If It's Not With You, which I just think is one of their best 80s bops ever. I think the sound is definitely In Excess mixed with Peter Gabriel. The lyrics could be about a relationship. It could be about an addiction. It doesn't matter. It just has like it's like a skipping song and just makes you want to dance. And indeed, they kind of stole a little bit of some of the moves that Talking Heads did for Stop Making Sense in their live dance of the song. But that's okay because those are awesome, and I'm glad I learned about them. That moves into Surrounded by Heads and Bodies, which is just a super pretty, almost more proggy track than Mine, which is a really beautiful song. He brings a lot of heart to it. I Couldn't Be More in Love. So you kind of get a little bit of these like ballads at the end, which I really like. Like you get more of the upbeat, like future pop stuff at the beginning, and then at the end it kind of goes back into reality and really gets tapped with his feelings. And then I Always Want to Die Sometimes, really cool ending, which feels, it's definitely a Brit pop type song, a little different than what they did, but it's just so well written. And when you kind of like hear those strings at the end, it just is a perfect little like bow to tie up the album. So I think it's just, it flows so well. There's so many different kinds of songs on it, but they all work together, and they all kind of focuses on like, let's do a reflection of this weird age that we live in and our role with technology and, these different political events and like how they all tie into our personal lives. So I love how the album kind of focuses on that. I think it's cohesive. I think it's creative. 5 stars and more for A Brief Inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, you and I shared pretty similar sentiments. We both really like that record a lot, but I mean, it says a lot that it's pretty much guaranteed top 3 of the entire decade for you. And it might not even make my top 5 of 2018. 2018 is just such a loaded year.
It was a good year. I'll give you
Look, like
that.
just looking back, Historian, Lucy Dacus, Lush, Snail Mail. Yeah, both the Kanye records are really good that year. Father John Misty's best record. A really great Elvis Costello record. There's just so much. There's just so much good in 2018 that's it's like it's crazy. Well, with that being said, 1975. I'm sure there are some people watching this that can't stand the group from Healy alone. I encourage you to start being fun because that's really just what this group is. At their best, they're just a really fun, really boisterous, just energetic group. They're everything that a lot of bands in the 80s were, but updated for the modern day. Really just interesting group that I don't think gets their due.
Yeah, for sure. I think the fact that they sound very poppy and like a lot of stuff that isn't that good makes people kind of pass them off and just say, "Oh,
Yeah.
this isn't the genre that I like," or something along those lines. But I think if you actually really look into these songs and how they're constructed and the lyrics and all that stuff, you realize there's a lot of thought being put into all of this material, and that they're really just a cut above other people that sound like this kind of music. So that's
Absolutely.
how I think of them.
I will say Healy, maybe not a great lyricist, but definitely an interesting one. Like I wouldn't go as far as to say that I think that he's like a poet or anything, but
Yeah, yeah.
what he's good at writing a memorable lyric. I'll give him that for sure.
It's his way of doing it is a little different. So
Yeah.
I think there's some songwriters that are really good at carefully creating a very, beautiful, lyric or whatever.
Yeah.
He just kind of throws things at dartboards, and I
Mhm.
just sometimes I think they land super well. So I think he's just very interesting. He has that like postmodern style, almost like David Foster Wallace or something along those lines. And I think that just makes him. There's not very many other frontmen that have his style, and so even though I agree that like there are times he'll sound a little awkward,
Yeah.
I just think he just constantly is engaging me. And I think a lot of times a lot of what he says is just very, very relevant and interesting in a way few others can get to. So I both
Absolutely.
agree with you as and I'm also defending him as just for what he does.
I like him a lot too. There's just some noticeable misses at points. And one of the bigger reasons why I think Notes got sort of panned. But anyways, with that being said, Zach likes to expand a little bit. I think they're pretty cool. Onto a band that I think we can all agree is pretty cool next week. Bringing back Chris from The Killers and then bringing back Tammy from Phil Collins. We're going to be talking about the 8 albums from glam rock, art rock, electronic influencer, pop, kind of everything. We're talking about Roxy Music and their 8 records. Like great stuff in there. Really interesting group, eclectic group. Yeah, not a lot greater. Not much you can say about Roxy Music that hasn't been said 10 times over because there's too much to say about them. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and yeah,